regulation and integration of the body. So this is the introduction of Unit 3. So along the discussion, we will going to discuss about processing and interpreting sensory input and deciding what should be done at each moment. So each organ system performs a specific function for the body, and each organ system is typically studied independently. However, the organ system also work together to help the body maintain the homeostasis. So our objective at the end of the discussion, the students will be able to identify the regulation and integration of the body, know the structure and function of each organ, appreciate the importance of each organs of the body. So our table of contents is the nervous system and its nervous tissue, anatomy of the nervous system, the somatic nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, the neurological exam, and the endocrine system. So different organs can work together to perform a common function, like how the parts of the digestive system break down food. So we refer to an integrated unit as an organ system. Group of an organ system work together to make completely functional organism. Our body consists of a number of biological systems that carry out a specific function that necessary for everyday living. So our discussion is all about overview of each subtopic of this Unit 3. The nervous system is a very complex organ system. In Peter D. Kramer's book, Listening to Prozac, a pharmaceutical research, is quoted saying, "If the human brain were simple enough to us to understand, we would be simple too to understand it." So that is on 1994. So that quote is from the early 1990s. In the 2 decades since, the progress has continued at an amazing rate within the scientific discipline of neuroscience. So it is an interesting conundrum to consider that the complexity of the nervous system may be too complex for it. So, but our current level of understanding is probably nowhere to close it to that limit. Nervous tissue is one of the 4 major classes of tissue. It is specialized tissue found in the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So it consists of neurons of supporting cells called neuroglia. The nervous system is responsible for controlling the body and the communication among its parts. So one of the easiest way to begin to understand the structure of nervous system is to start with a large division and work through a more depth in understanding. So in this chapter, the finer of the nervous system will be explained by a specific reporter. So, but first, looking at an overview of the system will allow you to begin to understand how its parts work together. The focus of a specific discussion is on nervous or neutral tissue, both its structure and its function. So the nervous system is responsible for controlling much of the body, both through somatic, which is the voluntary, and the autonomic, involuntary function. The structure of the nervous system must be described in detail to understand how many of these functions are possible. So there is a physiological concept known as localization of function that states that certain structures are specifically responsible for prescribed function. So it is underlying concept in all anatomy and physiology, but the nervous system illustrates the concept very well. The human nervous system can be divided into two interacting subsystems: the peripheral nervous system, the PNS, and the central nervous system, which is the CNS. The CNS consists of the brain and spinal cord, while the peripheral nervous system is an extensive network of nerves connecting the CNS to the muscle of the sensory structure. So, fresh or unstained nervous tissue can be described as gray or white matter, and within those two types of tissue, it can be very hard to see in any detail. So, however, a specific regions and structure have been described. They were related to a specific function. So, understanding this structure and function they perform and requires a detailed description of the anatomy of nervous system, delving deep into what the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system structures looks like. So, the place to start in this study of the nervous system is the beginning of the individual human life within the womb. The embryonic development of the nervous system allows for a simple framework on which progressively more complicated structure can be built. So with this framework in place, a throughout investigation of the nervous system is possible.
The somatic nervous system. The somatic nervous system is traditionally considered a division within the peripheral nervous system. However, this misses an important point. Somatic refers to a functional division, whereas peripheral refers to an autonomic division. The somatic nervous system is responsible for our conscious perception of the environment and for our voluntary responses to that perception by means of skeletal muscles. Peripheral sensory neurons receive input from environmental stimuli, but the neurons that produce motor responses originate in the central nervous system. The distinction between the structures of the peripheral and central nervous system and functions of the somatic and autonomic system can most easily be demonstrated through a simple reflex action. When you touch a hot stove, you pull your hand away. Sensory receptors in the skin sense extreme temperature and the early signs of tissue damage. This triggers an action potential which travel along the sensory fiber from the skin through the dorsal spinal root to the spinal cord and directly activates a ventral horn motor neuron. That neuron sends a signal along its axon to excite the bicep brachii, causing contraction of the muscle and flexion of the forearm at the elbow to withdraw the hand from the hot stove. The withdrawal reflex has more components, such as inhibiting the opposing muscles and balancing posture while the arm is forcefully withdrawn, which will be further explored at the end of this chapter. A more complex example of somatic function A somatic function is a conscious muscle movement. For example, reading of this text starts with visual sensory input to the retina, which then projects to the thalamus and onto the cerebral cortex. A sequence of regions of the cerebral cortex process the visual information, starting in the primary visual cortex of the occipital lobe, and resulting in the conscious perception of these letters. Subsequent cognitive processing results in understanding of this content. As you continue reading, regions of the cerebral cortex in the frontal lobe plan how to move the eyes to follow the lines of text. The autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is often associated with the fight or flight response, which refers to the preparation of the body to either run away from a threat or to stand and fight in the face of the threat. To suggest what this means, consider the very unlikely situation of seeing a lioness hunting out on the savannah. This is not a common threat that humans deal with in the modern world. It represents the type of environment in which the human species thrive and adapted. The spread of humans around the world to the present state of the modern age occurred much more quickly than any species would adapt to environmental pressures such as predators. However, the reactions modern humans have in the modern world are based on these prehistoric situations. If your boss is walking down the hallway on the Friday afternoon looking for volunteers to come in on the weekend, your response is the same as the prehistoric human seeing the lioness running across the savannah. Fight or flight. However, the autonomic nervous system is not just about responding to threats. Besides the fight or flight response, there are the responses referred to as rest and digest. If the lioness is successful in her hunting, then she is going to rest from the exertion. Her heart rate will slow, breathing will return to normal. The digestive system has a big job to do. Much of the function of the autonomic system is based on the connections within an autonomic or visceral reflex. The neurological example. A man arrives at the hospital after feeling faint and complaining of pins and needles feeling all along one side of his body. The most likely explanation is that he has suffered a stroke which has caused a loss of oxygen to a particular part of the central nervous system, or CNS. The problem is finding where in the entire nervous system the stroke has occurred by checking reflexes, sensory responses, and motor control. A healthcare provider can focus on what abilities the patient may have lost as a result of the stroke and can use this information to determine where the injury occurred. In the emergency department of the hospital, this kind of rapid assessment of neurological function is key to treating trauma to the nervous system. In the classroom, the neurological exam is a valuable tool for learning the anatomy and physiology of the nervous system because it allows you to relate the function of the system to a particular location in the nervous system. As a student of anatomy and physiology, you may be planning to go into an allied health field, perhaps nursing or physical therapy. You could be in the emergency department treating a patient such as the one just described. An important part of this course is to understand the nervous system. This can be especially challenging because you need to learn about the nervous system using your own nervous system. The first chapter in this unit about the nervous system began with a quote. If the human brain were simple enough for us to understand, we would be too simple to understand it. However, you are being asked to understand aspect of it. A healthcare provider can pinpoint problems with the nervous system in minutes by running through the series of tasks to test neurological function that are described in this chapter. You can use the same approach, though not as quickly, to learn about neurological function and its relationship to the structure of the nervous system. The nervous system is made up of the brain and spinal cord as the central organs, and the ganglia and nerves as organs in the periphery. The brain and spinal cord can be thought of as a collection of smaller organs, most of which would be the nuclei, such as the collomotor nuclei, but white matter structure play an important role, such as the corpus callosum. Studying the nervous system requires an understanding of the varied physiology of the nervous system. For example, the hypothalamus plays a very different role than the visual cortex. The neurological exam provides a way to elicit behavior that represent those varied functions. The endocrine system. You may never have thought of it this way, but when you send a text message to two friends to meet you at the dining hall at 6, you're sending digital signals that you hope will affect their behavior, even though they are some distance away. Similarly, certain cells send chemical signals to other cells in the body that influence their behavior. This long-distance intercellular communication or coordination and control is critical for homeostasis, and it is the fundamental function of the endocrine system.
Endocrine system.
The glands and organs that make hormones and release them directly into the blood so they can travel to tissues and organs all over the body. The endocrine system is made up of glands and organs that make hormones that control many important functions in the body.
As for conclusion, the system of the body is made of many codependent systems. The system of the body each have an important individual function, but this function can be directly or indirectly affect the other system. If one function is lacking, it can hurt every other system and greatly affect your health. The system of the body each have unique ways of functioning and have different things that can affect them positively and negatively. So each individual system works conjunction with other system to improve our chances of survival by maintaining a stable internal body environment. This stable environment is known as homeostasis.